Shalom Hadavarniks. Welcome to Hadavar Messianic Ministries and our School of Biblical and Jewish Studies. We're studying Messianic Prophecy, Rabbinic and Messianic Views, and we're in the Supplementary Prophecy section of the course, and this is session number 24. So let's go ahead and review where we were in session 23. Session 23, we were still in the prophets, and we were looking at Micah 5:2, the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem of Judea. Now, an overview of the context, and I've corrected the slide. It's a little different from the original slide that you saw last session. The type of prophecy, it's a blend prophecy. The pre-existence, the first coming, the tribulation, and the second coming Messianic kingdom are all blended together in such a way that you can't see the time gaps between these events. So it's a blend prophecy. It's also a complete career prophecy. New Testament usage, it's a literal prophecy with a literal fulfillment. And the background, we looked at the background, and after exploring the background quickly, we started into the exposition of the key texts. We started in the tribulation, chapter 4, verse 9 to chapter 5, verse 1, and we saw that Jewish people would have to be rescued from Babylon, but more importantly, from Jerusalem as well, because God would bring many, many nations against Jerusalem. Now, why would God do that? Well, he has a plan. The nations don't know his plan, but he does. His plan is to thresh them. He will bring them to Jerusalem like that pile of grain is piled up in the middle, and then he will run his threshing sledge over them. And the threshing sledge, of course, is run around on the grain, crushing it and freeing the grain for harvest. And the threshing sledge will be the IDF, will be Israel's army. And even though the Antichrist army will suffer tremendous losses, again, in the end, Israel will lose. And Jerusalem will be captured by the Antichrist and his forces. And that means that the Jewish people need to be rescued. So in chapter 5, verse 2, the rescuer comes into view. We come to the first coming here, chapter 5, verse 2a, and this speaks of Yeshua's humanity. And then in the middle of the verse, in chapter 5, verse 2b, we go to the distant past and we see his divinity. Then we jump back to the tribulation in chapter 5, verse 3a, and then we move into the second coming and the kingdom in chapter 5, 3b through 4. Then we asked the question, is Micah 5, 2 through 4 Messianic? And we looked for rabbinic support. We looked in Sepharia, and we saw that Targum Jonathan said this was Messianic in nature. He translated it, or paraphrased it, I should say, as Messianic. We also went to Dr. Edersheim's book, The Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah, and he directed us. We went back to Sepharia, and under Dr. Edersheim's direction, we looked up Pirkei the Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Eliezer saw this as Messianic, as did Rashi in Micah 5:2. And we went to the Sanchino books of the Bible, and guided by them back to Sepharia, and we looked up Talmud, Yoma 10a, and also in the Talmud, Sanhedrin 98b. And both of these sections saw this section of the prophets as Messianic. Then we looked at the fulfillment in Yeshua, point D in our outline. Matthew 2, 1 through 6 portrayed exactly what Yeshua went through. And we looked at the four interpretive techniques and found that this term, or this prophecy, Matthew chapter 2, is a pashat. It's a plain sense, a literal sense prophecy, a literal prophecy with a literal fulfillment. Micah 5:2 said that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, and Matthew chapter 2 says, yes, the Messiah was born in Bethlehem. Literal. So our fulfillment in Yeshua was also seen in Colossians 1:15 through 19, where he is the image of the invisible God, he is the creator, and Yeshua is before all things. So he exists from eternity past. And then in John 17:24, Yeshua himself said that the Father loved him before the foundation of the world. So Yeshua existed before the universe was created. Now, Jewish positions or objections, we went to the Sanchino books of the Bible, and first of all, they say that the verse is Messianic. That's very clear. It's about the Messianic king. But then the second position is that the verse is fulfilled in King Hezekiah, not in Yeshua. And we find that in Sanhedrin 99a. Rabbi Hillel said, there shall be no Messiah for Israel, because they've already enjoyed him in the days of Hezekiah. Our response, Hezekiah is not a good candidate for messiahship. He's just a flawed and temporary human being. He's subject to death and decay. And Rabbi Joseph in Sanhedrin 99 would agree with us. He said, Rabbi Joseph responded, may God forgive him, and forgive Rabbi Hillel for saying so. And we would agree with Rabbi Joseph there. Our conclusion, Yeshua is the God-man Messiah, and our summary, the God-man will be born in Bethlehem of Judah, just as predicted. Well, we're still in the prophets, so now let's move to Zechariah, the book of Zechariah, chapter 6, verses 12 and 13, where we see the Messiah will be both priest and king. As far as our overview goes, we had already looked at the introductory material, so I've corrected this slide. It's a little different from what you saw last session. The type of prophecy, it's a literal prophecy with a literal fulfillment. The New Covenant usage is a second coming prophecy. And then our background was the 8 visions. So we summarized the 8 visions in the beginning of Zechariah. And then we began in the prophet's present time in chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. And we saw that the section would end with two lessons. We saw that Zechariah was ordered to take an offering from the Babylonian returnees and then fashion a crown of silver and gold. And it was not a crown for the high priest, it was a crown for a king. The high priest headgear here is normally called a netzer. This is called an atarot. So there is a debate over the word crown in the Jewish world. One side notes that the word crown is plural, atarot, and says that 2 crowns were being made, one of silver for the high priest and one of gold for Zerubbabel, the political leader. Others say that there's only 1 crown being made. So now we move into the new material, and this is actually the exposition of the key text that we're interested in. And we're going to jump from the prophet's present time in verse 11, thousands of years into the future, into the kingdom in verse 12. And this is the lesson for the distant future, Verse 12. Then say to him, thus says the Lord of hosts, behold, a man whose name is Branch, for he will branch out from where he is, and he will build the temple of the Lord. So speak to him, speak to Joshua. Zechariah, speak to Joshua, and tell him that the man is coming whose name is Branch. So this is a man. He is going to be human. He's going to be a person. He will not be. He will have a human nature, and that's the theme of the Gospel of Luke. It's also a messianic title. Remember the branch motif? We looked at Zechariah 3:8, where the branch was God's servant. And then this is the one we're concerned with here, Zechariah 6:12, where the branch is a man, speaking of his humanity. And it says that the man will grow up out of his place. The branch, the man, will grow up out of his place. That speaks of natural growth. And so he'll come from David's family. And that's reiterated in Isaiah 11:1. Then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. So he'll be of the family of David as required. And then we learn that he will build the temple of the Lord. Messiah will build the millennial temple, and this is in verse 13. Yes, it is he who will build the temple of the Lord, and he who will bear the honor and sit and rule on his throne. Thus he will be a priest on his throne, and the council of peace will be between the 2 offices. So we learn, first of all, that this individual will bear the glory. And I think a better, fuller translation would be, he will bear the awe-inspiring splendor of deity. We're speaking of the Shekinah glory here. This is the Shekinah. And the Shekinah is the visible manifestation of God's presence. Now, maybe just illustrate that for you. God is omnipresent. He's everywhere. He's here with me as I do this video. He's here with you as you're watching this video, no matter where in the world you are. Now, if the Lord chose to manifest his his omnipresence, say, in this location right here, what might we see? Well, we might see a ball of fire, or smoke, a bright light, something like that. But God is present here. He just hasn't chosen to manifest his presence to us in a visible way. Well, that visible manifestation of God's presence is the Shekinah glory, and that is Yeshua. Yeshua is a form of the Shekinah glory of God. So he's going to bear the visible manifestation of God's presence, and then he's going to sit and rule on his throne. That speaks of his kingly functions. He's Israel's king, and he shall be a priest on the throne as well. That speaks of priestly functions. He'll be Israel's priest. And notice it says the council of peace will be between the two offices. And that can happen because of Isaiah 9:6. And here he's described in Isaiah 9:6, for a child will be born to us, that's his humanity. A son will be given to us, that speaks of his deity. And the government will rest on his shoulders. He's the king, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. So the peace can exist between these two offices, between the kingly office and the priestly office, because he is a wonderful counselor, a godly counselor, and he's also the Prince of Peace. Now, in the past, there was a certain amount of friction between these two offices, between king and priest. We read about that earlier as we looked at the life of Uzziah. But the council of priests will be between both of them, because the Messianic person can administer both roles. Now, how does he administer both roles without conflict? All right, let's compare the two orders of priesthood, the order of Melchizedek and the order of Aaron, or the Levitical priesthood. Now, under the New Covenant, under the Brit Hadashah, in the dispensation of grace, the order of priesthood is not Levitical, but it's under the order of Melchizedek. Now, under the order of Melchizedek, one man can be both priest and king. Under the Levitical system, which was under the Torah, one man could not be priest and king. Under the Levitical system, the priest had to be from the tribe of Levi, and the king had to be from the tribe of Judah. Under the Levitical order, there could never be peace between the office of king and the office of priest if one man occupied both offices. That was illegal. Okay? So that would create disobedience, friction, and discord, period. We saw that with King Uzziah. Now, here we see very clearly that the Messiah will be both priest and king. He'll be a priest from Judah, and he'll be a king from Judah, because he will function under the order of Melchizedek. He functions under the order of Melchizedek. So this is the lesson for the distant future. The Messiah will be man, God, king, and priest. However, the phrase, there will be peace between the two, does not merely mean harmony will exist between the priest and king. When the two offices are united in one person, harmony would be expected. That would be expected. But the thought goes on beyond the idea of harmonious consultations between two offices. It sees peace as the object of the consultation. The thought is something like this. The Messiah, who unites in himself royalty and priesthood, will counsel and promote the peace of his people. So the object of his priesthood will be the peace of his people. He'll be a peacemaker. This is exactly what Yeshua does even for us today. He's the Prince of Peace, bringing peace of mind and peace of heart to his people. He can bring God's perfect peace, the peace that passes all understanding, because he is our priest and king. All right, let's move on to point C in our outline, rabbinic support. Is Zechariah 6:12 and 13 messianic? Well, my source is the Messianic Good News website, and their article, very helpful article, Messiah, how to recognize the Messiah in the Jewish writings. So we went to that article, and they presented us with Abarbanel's position. Abarbanel writes, Rashi has written that the words, behold the man whose name is the branch, have by some been interpreted of the Messiah. Here he means Jonathan, that's Targum Jonathan. whose interpretation he did not receive. So Abarbanel criticizes Rashi for rejecting the Messianic view of Targum Jonathan. So we have some rabbinic support right there. Abarbanel accepts the Messianic view. So he felt it was Messianic in nature. Well, let's go on. For he adds that the building here is spoken of altogether, refers altogether to the second temple. But if this prophecy refers to the second temple and Zerubbabel, I wish I could ask them, why is it said the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up up from beneath him? Surely we know that every man grows up to manhood, and even to old age and hoary hairs. The implication is, Zerubbabel's going to die. Rashi, perceiving this objection, that Zerubbabel is only human, he's not the eternal king that's promised in the prophecy. Rashi, perceiving this objection, has interpreted this to mean that he shall be of the royal seed. So he's trying to continue the length of Zerubbabel by knowing he is a descendant of the royal seed, and the royal seed will continue on. Abarbanel objects, but this is not correct, for the words from beneath him teach nothing about the royal family. So you can't bring in this dodge that it's the royal family that's being referred to, and that's going to go on. All right, that's his first objection, and now Abarbanel offers a second objection. But at all events, I should like to ask him, if these words be spoken of Zerubbabel, why does the prophet add that he shall build the temple of the Lord? Why this repetition to express one single event? The commentators have no answer but this: it is to confirm the matter. But if this would be the case, it would be better to repeat the words 3 or 4 times, for then the confirmation would be greater still. So he kind of disdains this view that it's the repetition is due to confirmation. He sees that as a weak position, and I would agree with him there. And he goes on in a third objection, and he says, I should further ask them how they can interpret of Zerubbabel these words: he shall bear the glory and shall sit and rule upon his throne. For he, Zerubbabel, never ruled in Jerusalem, never sat upon the throne of the kingdom, but only occupied himself in building the temple, and afterwards returned to Babylon. So he's saying the branch cannot be Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel does not fit the description of a king, of a king, that's for sure. All right, so then let's move on to another source, which is the Midrash Rabbah. And in the Midrash Rabbah we read, Zerubbabel who built the second temple, and from him would be descended the Messiah who would rebuild the temple. So that's basically the same position. This refers to Zerubbabel, but it goes beyond Zerubbabel to the Messiah. So that's a kind of a variation on Rashi's position there. And then I went to the Rabbinic Messiah, where Tom Huckle has categorized a lot of these rabbinic verses. And we start with Midrash Rabbah, Numbers 18:21. And there we read the double Zadi. The Zadi there is a Hebrew letter. The double Zadi is hinted at in the verse, behold, a man whose name is the shoot, Zemach, and who shall shoot up Yitzmach, etc., quoting Zechariah 6:12. This refers to the Messiah. So Midrash Rabbah is very clear about that. Now Midrash Rabbah Lamentations 1:16 and 5:1. Here we learn what is the name of King Messiah. Rabbi Joshua ben Levi said, his name is Shoot, as it is stated, behold, the man whose name is Shoot, and who shall shoot up out of his place and build the temple of the Lord. Again, quoting Zechariah 6:12. So this is seen as very, very messianic. And then the Midrash on Proverbs 19:21, the Messiah has been given 7 names, and these are Yinon, our righteousness, Shoot, Comforter, David, Shiloh, Elisha. Do you see the importance of the branch motif now, or the shoot, branch or shoot? That's the same motif that we've been looking at over and over again. Well, let's continue. Where in Scripture is shoot? In the verse, behold, a man called the shoot, the branch, shall shoot up from the place where he is, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. Again, quoting Zechariah 6:12. And then Targum Jonathan, this is a paraphrase that Rashi didn't like at all. Say unto him, thus says the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold, the man whose name is the Messiah. He is destined to be revealed and to be anointed, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. So we would fully agree with that. That is definitely a messianic rendering of the verse, and a paraphrase of the verse. And then the life and times of Jesus the Messiah. We just close with Dr. Alfred Edershine's comment. Zechariah 6:12 is universally admitted to be messianic. And so in the Targum, the Jerusalem Talmud, and Pirkei the Rabbi Eliezer, and in the Midrashim. So he saw that as very, very strong rabbinic support for this being a messianic prophecy. All right, let's move on to point D, our fulfillment in Yeshua. Remember, this is a literal prophecy with a literal fulfillment, and the New Covenant usage, it's a second coming prophecy. And we start with Revelation 19:16. This will stress that Messiah, Yeshua, will be the king. And on his robe and on his thigh, he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So definitely at the second coming, he will be the king of Israel, even though he was rejected at the first coming. And then we go on to Hebrews chapter 7 through chapter 10. That's 4 chapters, all dealing with the fact that Yeshua is our high priest. So Yeshua is our king. He's Israel's king. He's our priest. He's Israel's priest. He is the priest king, very clearly in the Brit Hadashah. Now, we move on to point E, Jewish positions or objections. What are some other positions that you might take? What are any objections to our view? So let's take a look at what we've got here. We start off in Sepharia, and we read that the shoot is Zerubbabel and the priest is Joshua. That is Rashi's position. Rashi said, whose name is the shoot. He is Zerubbabel. He very clearly thinks this is Zerubbabel, mentioned above. Behold, I bring my servant the shoot. Since his greatness burgeoned little by little. He, like a branch, he grew larger and larger. He grew stronger and stronger. Some interpret this as referring to the King Messiah, but the entire context deals with the time of the Second Temple. So that's Rashi's position. This is not messianic at all. And then Rabbi Steinsaltz, his position, say to him, stating, so said the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold, a man, Zamach is his name. This is apparently referring to Zerubbabel, the man who sprouted Tzamach in Babylonia. And he will not receive power from others, but will sprout Yitzmach from his place, from his own roots and soil, and build the sanctuary of the Lord. He will build the sanctuary of the Lord, and he will assume majesty, kingship, and he will sit and rule upon his throne. The man called Zamach will be the political ruler, and there will be a priest, Yehoshua, alongside his throne. So we have the king on his throne and Yehoshua alongside his throne, and with authority in spiritual matters, and yet peaceful counsel will be between the two of them. Now, our refutation, our response to this, as Barbanel stated, he, Zerubbabel, never ruled in Jerusalem, never sat upon the throne of the kingdom, but only occupied himself in building the temple and afterwards returned to Babylon. So Zerubbabel doesn't fit at all. Now, in reference to the sentence, thus he will be a priest on his throne, Rashi states, and he shall sit, the high priest shall sit on the throne of the priesthood. So Rashi is positing 2 thrones, a political throne and a priestly throne. However, 2 thrones are not indicated in the context, nor are they found in Israel's history. Steinsaltz says, the man called Zamach will be the political ruler, and there will be a priest, Yehoshua, alongside his throne, with authority in spiritual matters. And then we come to Sanchino Books of the Bible, and we read there shall be a priest before his throne. The priest is, of course, Joshua. He will enjoy power and honor second to the king. So our response, a refutation to this position. The common element in all these positions is the understanding that the priest and the king cannot be the same person. Of course, they're operating under the Torah mentality here, not under the Brit Hadashah mentality. The rabbis are attempting to keep the king and the priest distinct by rendering the Hebrew preposition all as before or as alongside, or by imagining a priestly throne of some sort. However, the pronoun used in the verse is a third person masculine singular, he, in all cases referring to one individual, not two. So we're only referring to one individual here. In addition, the construction on his throne is identical in both instances. Al-Kiso and Al-Kiso. Exact same construction demands consistent translation. If the one person that we're talking about here, singular pronoun, is going to reign on his throne, then that same person will be a priest on his throne. The exact same construction demands consistent translation. Now, the little Hebrew preposition all, a very important little word here. It has a wide range of meaning. The most common usage expresses motion or rest on or above something, as here, on his throne. On his throne. Now, here is a pictorial rendering of my Bible word study search in Logos Pro. And I did a Bible word study search on the preposition all. And you can see the total 5,281 times all shows up as a preposition in the Hebrew text. That's a lot of usages, isn't it? Yeah. And you can see all those different colors. Those different colors signify a different usage of all. Now, the most prominent usages are the colors blue, red, and orange. Blue, red, and orange. On, over, and against. And you can see the usage on is by far the most common usage. And it makes perfect sense here in the text. The second most common usage is over. I suppose you could stretch that to be okay. He's over his throne. You might say that's a picture of sitting on the throne or ruling from the throne or whatever. So over might work. Wouldn't be as strong, but you sure wouldn't want to use the third most popular rendering, against, that he's a priest against his throne. That wouldn't work at all. So anyway, when it all boils down to it, the preposition should be rendered on. That's the most common usage of all. On. Now, in addition, these renderings do not fit the plain meaning of the text. The text in verse 12 refers to the branch. The pronoun he consistently refers to the branch, the Messiah, one person. He, the branch, will branch out, verse 12. He, the branch, will build the temple, verses 12 and 13. He, the branch, will bear honor, verse 13. He, the branch, will rule, verse 13. He, the branch, will sit on his throne, verse 13. He, the branch, will be a priest. So the verse is correctly translated, he will be a priest on his throne, showing that the priest will also be king. The two offices will be united in one individual. And then we'll take a quick look at the Jewish Study Bible by Berlin and Brettler. And there, in regard to verses 11 and 12, they state, one would expect that the king would be crowned, but only the high priest Joshua is. So they're saying the king. They're recognizing that the king's not in place there. No king, much less Zerubbabel, is mentioned. Ibn Ezra, Radak, Rashi, and others consider Zerubbabel to be the branch. So that's a typical position we've looked at already. And the person for whom the other crown was meant. So we have a king and a priest, Zerubbabel and the priest. The Targum, however, reflects a different understanding. And you shall take silver and gold and make a large crown and set it on the head of Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest. And you shall speak to him, saying, Thus speaks the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold, the man whose name is anointed, or Messiah, who will be revealed, and he will be raised up, and shall build the temple of the Lord. So significantly, the commentary, the study Bible goes on, significantly, it is likely, now that's a supposition. That's a supposition. It is likely that the text read crown in verse 11 and verse 14. See the New Revised Standard Version, rather than crown. So it's likely that it was singular rather than plural. If, and there's another supposition, if this is the case, then there was only one crown in the world of the book, and it was Joshua's. Okay. In the ideal future, both the branch and the priest will sit each on his own throne. So that's the position of the Jewish Study Bible. And our response? This is just another attempt to keep the two offices separate. This time using a questionable source. Notice that the use of the words, it is likely. Likely is a supposition. The supposition is not substantiated, as is the next sentence, if this is the case. So we got two suppositions here. Two theories, nothing factual. Since it is likely is not substantiated, then this might just as likely not be the case. It's just as likely to be plural as singular. That's the thing. It's just a theory. The rabbis are twisting themselves into pretzels, trying to keep the king and the priest separate. But the text is singular. So there's no indication in the Tanakh or in Jewish history of two thrones, a political throne for the king and a priestly throne for the high priest. They're defending their position using two suppositions, two guesses, two presumptions, two speculations. Just stick with the text. Don't start supposing or guessing that it could have been different. It could have been different. All right, let's move to our conclusion. Messiah will be both priest and king, and the summary, Yeshua is the God-man, king, priest. All right, well, let's move on to our next prophecy. We're still in Messianic Prophecies and the Prophets. Let's move down to the book of Zechariah, chapter 9, verses 9 and 10, where the Messiah will be unique, possessing personal character, superior to and unlike any other king. His reign will be characterized by a universal rule of peace. So in the overview of the context, it's a blend prophecy. And let's review the four types of Messianic prophecy now real quick and if you want more details on this, you can pick up the Messianic Bible Study number 134 from RL Ministries. The New Testament quotes the Old Testament, and that's a good piece of material to have on hand in your library to review when you need to. Or, if you want to get into prophecy a little deeper, you can get into Arnold Fruchtenbaum's book, HaMashiach. And again, the material that we're about to review is in that volume as well. All right, the four types of Messianic prophecy. First coming only deals with the first coming, period. Only, that's it. And then the second coming prophecies only deal with the second coming and nothing else. That's it. Then there's the complete career prophecies. They deal with the first coming, the interval, the second coming, and the Messianic kingdom. That's the basic career of the Messiah. The complete career prophecy does not cover the eternal state. Why? Because the eternal state is in the Brit Hadashah. It's in the New Testament. It isn't located in the Tanakh. So it will come. It's only revealed in the Brit Hadashah. So that's a complete career prophecy. The first coming, the interval, the second coming, and the Messianic kingdom. And then a blend prophecy. The first and second comings are blended together without a hint of time, a hint of a time gap between them. And so the type of prophecy we have here is a blend prophecy. And the New Covenant usage, it's a literal prophecy with a literal fulfillment. Now the background. The background is found in Zechariah chapter 9, verses 1 through 8. This happens in the near future, during just slightly to the future of Zechariah's time, after Zechariah's time, but in the near future. So let's go ahead and read Zechariah 9, 1 through 8, and see what is predicted in those verses. The burden of the word of the Lord is against the land of Hadrach, with Damascus as its resting place. For the eyes of men, especially of all the tribes of Israel, are toward the Lord. And Hamath also, which borders on it, Tyre and Sidon, though they are very wise. For Tyre built herself a fortress, and piled up silver like dust and gold like the mire of the streets. Behold, the Lord will dispossess her and cast her wealth into the sea, and she will be consumed with fire. Ashkelon will see it and be afraid. Gaza too will writhe in great pain. Also Ekron, for her expectation has been confounded. Moreover, the king will perish from Gaza, and Ashkelon will not be inhabited. Verse 6, and a mongrel race will dwell in Ashdod, and I will cut off the pride of the Philistines. 7, and I will remove their blood from their mouth, and their detestable things from between their teeth, and then they also will be a remnant for our God, and be like a clan in Judah, and Ekron will be an Ekron like a Jebusite. And our final verse, but I will camp around my house because of an army, because of him who passes by and returns, and no oppressor will pass over them anymore, for now I have seen with my eyes. All right, so this is the historical background to Zechariah 9, 9, and 10. Verses 1 through 8 predicts the invasion of the land by a Gentile king. The invasion occurred during the days of Alexander the Great. He was the Gentile king. Alexander reached Jerusalem, but spared the city. That's the point of verse 8. So verses 1 through 8 refer to Alexander's invasion of the Middle East and his approach to Jerusalem. But in contrast to the Greek Gentile king, we come to verse 9, which speaks of a Jewish king who's going to come to the same city. And this is Zechariah 9, 9, and 10. This is why it's a blend prophecy. The first coming is mentioned in verse 9, when the Messiah king comes to Jerusalem for the first time. The second coming of the Messiah king to Jerusalem is found in verse 10. So let's pick it up in verse number 9. We begin our exposition of the key texts, and verses 9 and 10 deal with the coming of the king. Now this is a sudden contrast from a Greek king to a Jewish king, from Alexander the Great to Yeshua. So we start out in verse 8, in the near future, Alexander's coming, but in the distant future, at the first coming, is your Jewish king. The first coming of the Jewish king, back in the first century. So let's take a look at verse 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just. So the call goes out to rejoice. Don't fear, rejoice. Your king is coming to you. Your king, a Jewish king, not a Greek king, Israel's king. He's not against the Jews. He is for the Jews. And his description, he is just. This is the first aspect of his description. He is just means that he's associated with righteousness. And that's very similar to Jeremiah 23, 5 and 6. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he will reign as king, and act wisely, and do justice and righteousness in the land. So he's going to be righteous. In his days, Judah will be saved. Israel will dwell securely. And this is his name by which he will be called the Lord, our righteousness. So this Messianic king is going to be just and righteous. And this is in stark contrast to Alexander, who died in a drunken stupor. And here is a likeness of Alexander carved in ivory. Alexander the Great. He died in a drunken stupor. He did not live by God's standards of behavior. He wasn't a righteous king. Now, the king is also described as having salvation and humble. Well, that doesn't describe Alexander. Alexander brought death. He slaughtered any city that didn't immediately surrender to him. So it's not Alexander that we're looking at here, are we? He's humble. He's brought low by oppression, and that isn't Alexander. Alexander came in the pomp of power. Now here's Alexander receiving his defeated foes, and there he is, this very arrogant, proud pose there, isn't it? So Alexander was hardly humble and lowly. And the manner of his coming, and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So he comes riding on a donkey. A donkey in the Bible is a symbol of peace and of patience and of hard work and of understanding. And this is a very humble donkey. It's a colt, a foal. It's young. It's never been ridden at this point. But that's in contrast to Alexander. What did he ride? He rode on a white war horse. And it's quite an amazing picture there, isn't it, of Alexander on his war horse. The war horse, of course, is a symbol of war and conquest. So we're definitely not talking about Alexander anymore here. We're talking about the Messiah King. Now, the fulfillment of all this is found in Matthew 21, 1 through 11, with the triumphal entry. We'll look at that a little later. But there's a parallel account in John 12, 12 through 16. On the next day, the large crowd who had come to the feast, when they heard that Yeshua was coming to Jerusalem, took the branches of the palm trees and went out to meet him and began to shout, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel." And Yeshua, finding a young donkey, sat on it, as it is written, "Fear not, daughter of Zion. Behold, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt." And when these things his disciples did not understand at the first, but when Yeshua was glorified, then they remembered that these things were written of him, and that they had done these things to him. So the triumphal entry brings all this into focus. And there's many aspects that come into focus as well. He's, first of all, Zion's king, as proclaimed in Matthew 1:1. The record of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. So he's a Jew, he's the son of Abraham, he's a descendant of David, the kingly line. He's the Messiah, he's Zion's king. And he's to come unto you, Israel. And John 1:11 says he came to his own. He came unto you, Israel. And those who were his own did not receive him. The problem wasn't that he didn't come to us, we didn't receive him. He's also described as just. And that's the way Isaiah 53:11 describes him. As a result of the anguish of his soul, he will see it and be satisfied by his knowledge. The righteous one, my servant, will justify the many, and he will bear their iniquities. So he's going to bring justification. He's going to declare people innocent. He's going to declare people not guilty. And that's exactly what Yeshua does. He's also going to be humble and lowly, and that's the picture in Isaiah 53:2. For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of parched ground. He has no stately form or majesty that we should look upon him, no appearance that we should be attracted to him. So that's a parallel. And finally, he brings salvation with him, Isaiah 53:11. As a result of the anguish of his soul, he will see it and be satisfied by his knowledge. The righteous one, my servant, will justify the many, as he will bear their iniquity. So he'll participate in the removal of sins. So the life of the Messiah is briefly outlined here in the book of Zechariah, chapter 9, verse 9. All right, so with this fairly detailed picture of the Messiah brought forward, we now change our time frames. We're in the first coming in verse 9. Now we're going to jump 2,000 years into the future to the second coming in verse 10. 2,000 years elapse between verse 9 and 10. This is a blend prophecy. And here we start in with verse 10. We see that the instruments of war will be removed. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the horse from Jerusalem, and the bow of war will be cut off. So the chariot of war, here's a model of a Greek chariot thundering into battle. I'll cut off the horse from Jerusalem. That's the battle horse here, rising to the challenge of the war. And then the battle bow, and here's a Greek soldier with his bow, ready to fight the battle. All those instruments of war will be removed from Israel, and the Messiah will speak peace to the nations. He will cause peace to come. and he will speak peace to the nations. He's going to bring warfare to an end. And this is a primary objection to Yeshua by the Jewish community, a primary objection to him as Messiah. And the claim is, well, he never brought peace. We still have wars all over the place. Well, first of all, we're talking about we can have an inner peace and an outer peace, and also that the Messianic coin has two sides to it. The first side we should present is the gentle shepherd side of the coin. That's when Yeshua came the first time. He was the gentle shepherd. But as I said, the coin has two sides, and we flip the coin over for the second coming, and that's the mighty warrior side of the coin. So remember that. The Messianic coin has two sides, and he will bring peace. He will bring peace. Remember our four types of Messianic prophecies? There's the first coming prophecy, and the second coming prophecies, and the blend prophecy, combining two comings of the Messiah into one picture, and the complete career prophecy, covering the first coming, the interval, and the second coming. And this is a blend prophecy, 2,000 years between verse 9 and verse 10. It combines the two comings of the Messiah into one picture without a hint of all the time in between. Remember, there's a 2,000 years between the gentle shepherd side of the coin and the fierce warrior side of the coin. All right, the Messianic reign is going to come out in verse 10, and his dominion will be from sea to sea. So these are just general boundaries here. They're not detailed boundaries. And the southeastern boundary of Israel will be from the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. That'll be the southern boundary of Israel. And the Mediterranean Sea will be the western boundary. Just go up the coast there. That's the western boundary of Israel. Then he says, from the river to the ends of the earth. And from the river. Now the river there is the Euphrates River. So we've got to look north to the Euphrates River. That's going to be the northern boundary of Israel and the Messianic kingdom. Okay, from the river to the ends of the earth. So the capital of the world will be Jerusalem, but the rule of Jerusalem will be worldwide, kind of like Washington, D.C. in the United States. Our capital city is Washington, D.C., but it doesn't sit in a state. It sits in an administrative zone called the District of Columbia. Now here, Israel will be the capital city, Israel will be the capital country, and Jerusalem will be the capital city of the world, And he's quoting Psalm 72:8 there when he says, from the Euphrates River to the ends of the earth. So Yeshua will establish a kingdom that will be centered in Jerusalem as the capital city and in Israel as the capital country, but it will cover the entire world. Now, here is the Fertile Crescent, and this is a more detailed look at the borders of Israel during the Messianic kingdom. And if you search the scriptures, you can get these details, and they're just there to be found if you want to look for them. And here's some of them: Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Micah, Obadiah, Isaiah, Psalm 72, etc., etc. There's much more than that. But if you search the scriptures, you can create or you can reveal, I should say, that'll be better. You can reveal the detailed borders of Israel in the Messianic kingdom. All right, let's move to point C on our outline, rabbinic support. And there are three sources of support that I've found. The first one is rabbinic literature. This is source number one to see if this is a messianic verse. We're going to start with a selection entitled Sanhedrin 99a from the Talmud, and our source here is Messianic Good News and their article, How to Recognize the Messiah. Anyway, they quote Sanhedrin 99a, which says, Rabbi Hillel said, there shall be no Messiah for Israel because they've already enjoyed him in the days of Hezekiah. Rabbi Joseph said, may God forgive him for saying so. We've talked about this earlier. He's shocked that Hillel would say that. Now, and Rabbi Joseph continues, now, when did Hezekiah flourish? Think about it. During the first temple. Yet Zechariah, prophesying in the days of the second temple years later, proclaimed, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee." He's coming in the future. And he's having salvation. He's lowly and riding upon an ass, upon the foal of an ass. So he's not past. The Messiah is future. He couldn't believe that Rabbi Hillel would believe that. So in Sanhedrin 99a, Rabbi Hillel states his position concerning the Messiah. And Rabbi Hillel was a first-century rabbi. He was a contemporary of Yeshua. Here's kind of a light-hearted rendition of Rabbi Hillel. I kind of like it, kind of cute. Rabbi Hillel states that the Messiah had already come and gone because the Messianic person was none other than King Hezekiah. Rabbi Joseph immediately recognizes the problem with Hillel's position. Hezekiah passed off the scene long before Zechariah prophesied. So Zechariah is not looking back toward the time of Hezekiah. Zechariah is looking forward in time when he utters the prophecy. Rabbi Joseph realizes this prophecy can't possibly refer to Hezekiah. Hezekiah was long gone, and yet Zechariah says the Messiah is still to come. Therefore, Rabbi Joseph utters his explanation. May God forgive Rabbi Hillel for his incorrect teaching. May God forgive Rabbi Hillel for this teaching which will discourage Israel. May God forgive Rabbi Hillel for teaching the Messianic hope is over and done with. That's the implications of Hillel's position. And Rabbi Joseph proves Rabbi Hillel wrong by quoting Zechariah 9:9, the Messiah is yet to come. And he will come in the manner specified by Zechariah. So Rabbi Hillel is dead wrong. There still exists a Messianic hope for Israel. And the ironic part of this whole exchange lies in the fact that Hillel was a contemporary of Yeshua. And for this, I'd like us to turn to Luke chapter 2, verses 41 through 47. And there we read, "Now his parents," that's Yeshua's parents, "went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he became 12, they went up there according to the custom of the feast. And as they were returning, after spending the full number of days, the boy Yeshua stayed behind in Jerusalem. But his parents were unaware of it, but supposed him to be in the caravan. And they went a day's journey, and they began looking for him among their relatives and acquaintances. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem looking for him. Then, after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers. Sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions." And notice the reaction. "And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers." All right, back to Hillel now. When Yeshua visited the temple at age 12, Rabbi Hillel was one of the prominent sages of the time. Rabbi Hillel, more than likely, was one of the teachers who came face to face with this 12-year-old boy. Yeshua listened to Rabbi Hillel and asked him questions. And Rabbi Hillel was amazed at Yeshua's understanding and answers. And Rabbi Hillel, who said that Israel's Messianic hope had come and gone, looked the Messiah square in the face and didn't recognize him. What a sad and ironic exchange. He looked the Messiah square in the face and didn't recognize him. Pretty sad. All right, let's move on to what Rabbi Sadia Gaon said about Zechariah 9 and 10, Messianic good news. And again, the article, How to Recognize the Messiah. And there we find Sadia Gaon quoted. He's speaking to Daniel 7:13 there. And he says, "But is it not written of the Messiah, lowly and riding upon an ass? Yes, this shows that he will come in humility and not in pride upon horses." Now in Daniel 7:13 and 14, the Messiah is seen as coming in glory. But Sadia Gaon knows there's another side to the Messianic coin. There's another side to the Messianic person. There's a humble side. And consequently, in his comments in Daniel 7:13, Sadia Gaon quotes Zechariah in order to prove the Messiah's humility. The Messiah will be both humble and glorious. Now, next. Let's look at one of the Jewish community's most respected commentators, Rashi. And I'm going to the Soncino books of the Bible here. And Rashi is quoted. This can only refer to King Messiah, of whom it is said, and his dominion will be from sea to sea, since we do not find any ruler with such wide dominion during the days of the Second Temple. So Rashi clearly states that Zechariah 9:9 refers to the Messiah, King Messiah. Why? Because no Jewish king ever appeared and attained such wide-ranging authority. Next, the rabbinic commentary Pesikta also clearly identifies the one entering Jerusalem on a donkey as the Messianic person. And my source here is again Messianic Good News, but also you can get a copy of, or you can read a copy of Pesikta Rabbiti on the Internet Archive. And here I've picked it up off the Internet Archive. So here we go with, you can see that's Pesikta Rabbiti there. And let's pick it up at Pesikta 34. He is just and victorious, referring to Zechariah 9:9. That is the Messiah who was so called. Riding upon an ass describes the Messiah. And then from the Rabbinic Messiah by Tom Hunkel, his compilation of sources, Ecclesiastes Rabbah 1:9. Like the first Redeemer, so is the last Redeemer, just as it is said of the first Redeemer, and Moses took his wife and sons and put them on a donkey, Exodus 4:20, so it is said of the last Redeemer, that's the Messiah, gentle and riding on a donkey. Now the Rabbinic, so he compares the Messiah to Zechariah and the coming humbly, the prophecy of the Messiah coming humbly on a donkey. Then Midrash Rabbah, Genesis 48:9, I believe that is. And we read, the rabbis interpret, I, said God, am bound to the vine and the choice vine, that's Israel, his foal and his colt intimate, when he will come, of whom it is written, lowly and riding upon an ass, even upon a colt, the foal of an ass, Zechariah 9:9. And a footnote to this quote says, this is the Messiah. In other words, the Messiah. It will then be seen how God is bound to Israel. So that's definitely seen as a messianic verse. And Midrash Rabbah, Genesis 50, 60, 75, 6. Ass refers to the royal Messiah, for it says of him, lowly and riding upon an ass, Zechariah 9:9. All right. And then the Midrash to the Psalms, Book 2, Psalm 60, verse 3. Upon Edom do I cast my shoe, and trample it underfoot. As it is said, the foot shall trample it down. This is the foot of the Holy One, blessed be he. For Scripture says, yea, I trod them in my anger, and trampled them in my fury, even the feet of the poor. That is, the King Messiah, poor and riding upon an ass. So there he says, Zechariah 9:9 fits into all these trampling verses where God is trampling in his enemies. Poor and riding upon an ass will trample Edom down. Trample Edom down. Okay. Well, I think I've clearly established the fact that respected Jewish commentators agree with us as we state that Zechariah 9:9 and 10 refers to the Messiah. So our interpretation is not some wild theology dreamed up by some Gentile missionary designed to trick ignorant Jews into changing their religion. So we've looked at our first source of rabbinic support, and that's rabbinic literature. But now I've put up on the screen the second source of proving that this is messianic in nature, the two Messiah theory. So we've run out of time. I see that I'm right at the end of my time. We'll pick this up next session as we get into the two Messiah theory. Again, I think you'll find it fascinating, interesting, and edifying. So thanks so much for being our students. We'll see you next session. Lahithraot. להתראות.